Today, the blind and visual with Jack Kelly, we have Dale, and it's Bendler, right? Is that how
Correct.
it Bendler, who has been with the CIA for north of 35 years. Is that so? Is that right?
That's accurate.
So I'd love to find out what made you decide, because usually parents will say, "Hey, I want you to be a doctor. I want you to be a lawyer. I want you to be an accountant," a quote unquote safe kind of job. What made you decide to say, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to go into the CIA in a very dangerous kind of role"? Because that takes a lot of guts. Can you give some color, like what made you decide to do this?
Well, first, Jack, thanks for having me on. Yes, 37 years at CIA.
Mhm.
I officially retired in
Mm,
2014, so it's been a few years now, and I retired what is called overtly.
mhm.
I am allowed to put on my resume and participate in podcasts such as this as a retired CIA officer. So I grew up in South Jersey, actually closer to Philly than New York, and even in the Marine Corps, my nickname was Turnpike for a while. Um, and upon reflection, even after all these years, I really can't explain why I had to scratch that itch
Mm.
and join the military, and within the military, the Marine Corps. I'm mentioning my military service because there's no doubt that that was the springboard into a career in the CIA. So my father was a chemist. My mom and a housewife, which was the norm for late 50s, early
Mhm.
60s in the United States. And a little unusual for our socioeconomic standing, I didn't go directly to university. I think I probably would have gone to Drexel in Philadelphia, probably a 2.0 and go attitude. I don't think I was mature enough for university right out of public high school. Uh, and I will pause for just a second. It wasn't vogue at the time.
Mhm.
I would have been a perfect candidate for a gap year, and gap years rock. My wife and I are halfway to empty nesting with 3 boys. Gap years are a key tool parents can use. So I enlisted in the Marine Corps, and let me just say, in the late 70s, enlisting in the military wasn't very popular, and these were lean years for those who study national security issues, or history, or veterans themselves, that it was post-Vietnam, an anti-military lingering sentiment, racial issues, drug issues, poor budget, not much of mission. And I, however, cheated. I escaped to elite units of reconnaissance battalions and force reconnaissance in the Marine Corps. So the elite units within an elite corps, the Marine Corps. And again, I'm mentioning this because reconnaissance isn't sort of a direct action. Let's take that hill. Reconnaissance is being eyes and ears of the Marine Corps. So it's collection on enemy movements and stealth. So it wasn't much of a stretch for a young person to go from wearing camouflage and collecting on enemy movements in the bush or in the desert or in the jungle to, after obtaining a college degree, to put on a Brooks Brothers suit and collect information on enemies' plans, intentions, and activities. And that would be, of course, the Soviet Union, Communist China, Communist North Korea, Communist Cuba. And Islamic Iran was about to become Islamic Iran. And we really didn't have the Islamic terrorist issue, and we didn't have the cartel issues. But the Cold War was on, and it's what I wanted to do from the Marine Corps. Used a GI Bill to go to Rutgers, and then begin my career in the CIA in 1984.
What is it like when you're going on reconnaissance? It's like undercover. How is your life? I mean, do you cut ties a little bit with your whole family because you're concerned what might happen, or it has to be a very different lifestyle?
So let's reserve the word reconnaissance for uniform. That's a military mission.
Okay.
So let's use the word collection, human collection, for the intelligence community and espionage world. So at CIA, I was hired as a State Department official, and that my neighbors and acquaintances would have known me as a State Department official, but probably mother and father, and then serious girlfriend who would become
Mm.
fiance and wife. We would break cover and let them know,
Mhm.
because they can help you to protect that cover. And being too cool for school can actually backfire, and there could be jokes about, I think my husband's a spook, and sweetheart, you're not supposed to say that. The gentleman standing there is from Moscow, and he raised an eyebrow, for example.
So do you always have to be on edge for whatever you do and whatever you say, or after a while you just get so used to it that
So
it's second nature?
it's particularly important earlier in one's career, because you might be less well known and posted to sensitive locations. But as one becomes more senior and older, we work closely with foreign partners. And when I was the CIA chief of station in major European cities, I was a near public figure, which is double-edged. People might want to stay away from me because he's the CIA station chief, but if there is an adversary who, for whatever motivation, might want to talk to US intelligence,
Mhm.
well, Dale Bendler at 6'4", 250 pounds with a South Jersey accent and wearing a Brooks Brothers suit, he's my guy. I was a shingle that was a door they could knock on. It's called showcasing.
And so what does that mean? So is that when you're there, you're just trying to find information about you have some sort of project you're on and you try to delve into it, right?
So that, as you know, CIA created in 1947, a
Mhm.
really twofold mission to prevent another Pearl Harbor, which we did not do very well with, because of what happened in Lower Manhattan in 2001. Uh, the second one was to contain Soviet expansionism, which we did quite well without going to World War III conventional, but we helped with the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Some, to include me, subscribe to the argument that the Soviet Union, USSR, was sitting on the fence, and we helped to give it a nudge. So that with those two missions, so with the Cold War on, we wanted to cultivate relationships with all the Warsaw Pact countries and their allies, Communist Cuba, soon to become Communist Vietnam, Islamic Iran, certainly North Korea. So we wanted to be in touch with those folks. And that's what we would do, say, on a diplomatic circuit. This is, Jack, it's very interesting that you bring this up, because that's more traditional. Things changed dramatically after 11 September, because you weren't going to find Bin Laden or Zawahiri, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. You're not going to find them on a cocktail circuit in Lisbon, for example. So the mission.
So wait, walk us. So what happened? So it changed. There was a one way of, doing your job in Europe wearing the Brooks Brothers suit, but then 9/11, it sounds like everything changed. And how did that, what happened?
A revolution,
Mhm.
a revolution. Uh, on 10 September, one would be interested in a 4 or 5 paragraph intelligence report.
Mhm.
Someone, I mean, the president, the secretary of defense, the secretary of state would be interested in an intelligence report that might be 4, 5, 6 paragraphs long, the plans, intentions, and activities of the Chinese in sub-Saharan Africa, for example. On 12 September, we wanted the geocode, the street address of a Islamist in Berlin. And so from strategic to
Mhm.
extraordinarily tactical. And one might say, but you can't take your eye off the ball, China, and worry about a 19-year-old. Well, yes, you can if he or she is going to fly a 767 into the north face of the North Tower of the World Trade Center. So it was
Mhm.
game on, and just sheer mathematics, because we were chasing 19-year-olds who might have a suicide vest anywhere in the world, we probably devoted less resources to Russia and China. I think it's right-sized now.
So what has, so you have to balance having to worry now about these bad actors that are trying to do harm to Americans, but at the same time, you still have worry about, Russian and all sorts of other countries that you have to be aware of what's going on that could hurt Americans, right?
So that's why there are intelligence failures.
Hmm.
In my career, I've witnessed and participated in some intelligence failures, and I wanted to make sure your audience was aware of that.
Hmm.
But you cannot scotch tape on a 25th hour to a day, and there's competing resources, and you can't think about the Brazil Venezuelan bilateral relationship if there's a threat to the homeland in the name of militant Islam. There's other threats I'm talking about post 11 September, and the threat was militant Sunni Islam. And everybody at CIA stopped on a dime and focused on that 19-year-old in Berlin that we were trying to find.
I'm not,
Revolutionary.
Dale, this is wild to me because like what I feel, don't laugh at this, but it almost seems like how do you sleep at night when running through your head must be like 10 different things that could possibly go wrong at any one time. Right? It seems like there's always something. And that got to be a lot of stress and a lot of like anxiety, a lot of worry, a lot of, or is it just part of the job? After a while, you just realize, hey, I just have to tackle one issue at a time and do the best, I can and my team can do.
Jack, you bring up a really good point. If everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. And I'm letting you know,
Mhm.
at least until the late 20 teens, it was that 19-year-old suicide bomber who was trying to hurt US presence,
Mhm.
private sector or government abroad. I think it's
Mhm.
right sizing now. But it was hell, because particularly after 11 September and the tremendous burden on the agency, CIA, to not let that happen again. Uh, we must recall what was being said at the time. It wasn't if, but
Mhm.
when and how it's going to happen again. So let's give some credit due. We've had our intelligence failures, but there's some credit. We haven't seen a repeat of a 9/11 magnitude attack um, in this country. That's undoubtedly many were thwarted.
And you probably never hear of the ones that were thwarted, right? Those don't come out. So like it's there's probably a lot of things that do happen or they're trying to happen, but fortunately it didn't take place.
Well, us in the business may not even know about it
Mhm.
as well because we had forces in Syria, or we stationed Apache helicopters in this part of the Iraqi desert, or we helped a foreign partner build up a robust counterterrorism
Mhm.
uh, force, and it dissuaded um, uh, uh, an 18-year-old sitting on the fence. Should I be a terrorist or not? Should I be a terrorist or not? And they looked out the window and said, no, I'm going to get captured or killed. These guys are too good. And we may never know that we dissuaded a fence sitter from becoming a terrorist. Not suicide vest or driving a 767 into a building, but or getting an automatic weapon and hosing down a school, but maybe just going to the kitchen at home and getting a steak knife and stepping outside and stabbing the first police officer that they find, like has happened in Paris.
If you like, can you kind of maybe go back and maybe share some of the different things you've done? Maybe because I see things in El Salvador, Cuba, Angola, whatever it may be. Any interesting anecdotes you could share about what your life was at times in all these different countries trying to protect America?
I do want to mention my time at Rutgers, because there might be some listeners, Jack, with
Mhm.
teenagers considering university or at university, and this may or may not be useful
Mhm.
for parents. But I spent my junior year abroad in Mexico City as part of the Rutgers program, a major in political science, a minor in Spanish, and it was excellent. And living abroad, it isn't just the language, but you're abroad, and do you like it and do you want more? So it sort of was a litmus test. Is a career in foreign intelligence for me? And it was. What I wanted to say to parents was, and this may sound surprising, it's the semester abroad and the year abroad isn't what it used to be because of iPhones. And of course, in my day, you had a dog-eared dictionary, and if you wanted to know the word for beer, you looked up sort of it. You needed to take a taxi home. If you want to get home, you better speak Spanish. Now with ChatGTP, instantaneous translation, Netflix, YouTube, calling home for free, international calls are free. Frankly, I'm just not sure the semester year abroad is worth it, is what it used to be, and also because of globalization and the proliferation of English. Still worth it. Still consider a semester abroad. It isn't just for the language, but the language is a big piece of it. But from Rutgers, because I had been in the Marine Corps and sort of was in the special forces of the Marine Corps, Force Recon, and then I had a degree, a decent degree, and a foreign language skill. I was very flattered, but I was hired by the CIA as a junior trainee back in 1984. And what's very important is the Cold War was on, and it was all about the Soviet Union, regardless of where you were going to be posted. But because I had that military background, I went more to our paramilitary side of the house. So there were some bush wars going around in the 80s, and in Southern Africa and Central America and in Southwest Asia. And I can tell you that I went as far as I could, as hard as I could, for as long as I could, to all those conflicts. And well, but when you're highly motivated, again, because of the Cold War is on, it's what I wanted to do. And I totally believed in the mission, and the CIA was the vehicle so I could fulfill that dream.
It's amazing, at times people will talk about, hey, do we have to spend all this money and energy and putting people into all these different countries? Are we spending a lot of money? But hearing you talk, this is the real life. It sounds like this is the necessity. Because I admit at times I'm like, why are we all over the world and spending all this money? But hearing you talk, I'm kind of changing my mind. It seems like if we don't do that, it's going to get worse for us. So it's if you just pretend and close your eyes and say everything's going to be okay because kumbaya, everyone's going to be nice. That's not how the world works. So you have to have people like yourself and your team that are constantly being vigilant and making sure we're safe.
Jack, it's called the third option.
Mhm.
This diplomacy doesn't always work, or it isn't enough.
Mhm.
And we really don't want to, and some of my politically conservative friends might be surprised that I say this, but we don't want to send 100,000 18, 19, and 20-year-olds back to Southeast Asia,
Mhm.
the Iraqi desert, or the mountains of Afghanistan. So between diplomacy and deploying our 18, 19, and 20-year-olds, it's the third option, and it's people like me, and maybe with some Army Green Berets. And what's really important about that third option in between diplomacy and conventional or more conventional battle is we understand that indigenous forces, they're going to have to win or lose their own wars. We can do a lot and we can help, but we just can't keep sending our treasure overseas, particularly with the results that we've had in Iraq and Afghanistan, about 20 years each, and we don't have the results that we wanted. So my generation is, I remember a warlord once said to me that a cat is even afraid, a cat once scolded is even afraid of cold water. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it isn't that we can't be afraid to defend ourselves, but we have to be careful about parachuting into every time there's conflict somewhere in the world. And frankly, I supported Mr. Trump's position, and I think many Democrats did as well. As soon as there was a Syrian civil war and Assad was about to fall in Damascus, we certainly didn't need the 82nd Airborne Division parachuting in, get in the middle of that. And let's let it play out. Let's see what our interests are. So with age, former gunslingers like me, we take a tad more conservative, not politically conservative, in a realistic view of armed U.S. intervention abroad.
So to me, that makes a lot of sense. First of all, I love the fact how you casually just throw in, "Hey, I'm speaking to a warlord," because that doesn't happen usually, in everyday conversations. But yeah, that makes sense because if there must be times where you feel, and the CIA and other agencies feel, hey, we absolutely have to do something. Other times say, wait, like we don't always have to maybe jump in when we really don't know what's happening and whose side are we on and how is this going to play out. So I guess, and how is that decided? Is that decided about the people in the home office, or it's on the field, or how do you make those decisions? What do we do with Assad? Like, what, do we let this collapse? Do we get help make it collapse? What happens if it does collapse? What does it make it even more dangerous?
But so, Jack, I'm from the intelligence
Yeah.
community, CIA. We collect or implement the president's uh, covert actions. So
Hmm.
we really do not do policy,
Right.
despite what you might see in Hollywood. That's really the Pentagon and the State Department and the White House would set the policy what to do about Assad. what the president, the State Department, and the Pentagon are asking CIA is Assad going to last? If not, what's going to replace Assad? What does that mean to Israel? What does that mean to the United States? Those are the questions for the CIA to answer.
And they're not easy questions to answer, I imagine, right? Because you don't know, you don't have a crystal ball how it's going to all play out, right? So these are tough decisions to make.
So for perhaps the majority of your audience from the private sector, business leaders, I would suggest with your, say, analysts in your companies, it's maybe the Colin Powell mantra, and that was a CEO might say to an analyst, tell me what you know, but tell me what you don't know. Be honest. Tell me what you know. Tell me what you don't know. And if I have time and if I want to, I'll ask you what you think. But tell me what you know and tell me what you don't know. So we really need, in fact, probably what got us in trouble in Vietnam and Iraq and Afghanistan is, particularly Vietnam, it's, Mr. President, we cannot defeat the Viet Cong on the battlefield because they have sanctuary in North Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos, and the Chinese and Soviet Union are quartermastering them to no end. Mr. President, we cannot win this counterinsurgency. No one was going to say that to JFK or LBJ in the 60s. I was too young for the Vietnam War, but I studied it. My generation that came after, we studied it very carefully. And there's some ghosts that over Iraq and Afghanistan, because those generals and admirals in charge of Iraq and Afghanistan clearly studied, didn't participate in, but clearly studied, I mean, lessons learned from Vietnam. And you could just see how they got drawn into this omnipotence of the United States, and there's tremendous, the enemy gets a vote at the table, so caution.
You mentioned Hollywood, and it does seem that you look at Hollywood movies and it's this brash, let's do this, and boom, every blowing stuff up. Whereas you hear you speak, it's much more cerebral. It's much more, thinking things through as opposed to just acting first and then thinking later, and really trying to figure out. That was like a game of chess. Before we do anything, let's just really be thoughtful where we're going to move our pieces.
So I was mid-career. I was fortunate enough, CIA sent me to a war college, the Naval War College in Newport, Rhode Island, and I greatly appreciated it. And to the credit of our Department of Defense, the students, it's mandatory reading is Clausewitz on War and Sun Tzu's The Art of War. And so you have an Eastern and Western perspective, and Clausewitz is the enemy center of gravity. Once you determine what that is, that's where you mass your force and you can defeat the enemy conventionally, where Sun Tzu is know your enemy, know yourself, and win, attack your strategy, win without ever going to war. And those I think that what gets us in trouble, that's other opinions out there, please, but because we do have tank ships and divisions and jets, that because we have Clausewitz as an option, we may tend to use it. Other countries without aircraft carriers, they subscribe a little bit more to the Sun Tzu perspective. And that's the whole counterinsurgency piece that the US culturally, we have trouble prosecuting.
Now, I don't know if this is a fair question to ask, but recently with these drones flying all over New Jersey, I'm in New Jersey and you were formerly in New Jersey as well. So you could, like, you look out and see all these drones and orbs and what have you. And then without the government saying what's going on, it leads you to the imagination. And then you go, all right, is it China trying to do something? Is that something that if, let's say you were still in the CIA, look at and start thinking, where are these drones? What's up? What's going on? And try to, map out, is this just coincidence? Is it, Lockheed having a new thing they're playing with? What do you think about the most recent thing that was happening with the drones, particularly all over New Jersey?
It's interesting. If it were a sensitive government program,
Mm-hmm.
probably 30 years ago, I would be a strong advocate for keeping it secret. We're a spy agency, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But now I'm more mature and a better sense of the intelligence communities serving the American people. And with congressional oversight, there should be more transparency. And there's fair questions being asked. I mean, sane, sober people have seen drones, and it's wrong to say, we don't think you saw what you saw.
Yeah,
Then,
exactly. Oh yeah, it was a helicopter. Like we've never seen a helicopter before.
and then
Yeah.
perhaps exacerbating the situation is when you say, well, some members of Congress or the Senate will give you a classified briefing on what this is. And that's a bucket of gasoline on a spark. And I don't think it was handled well,
Do you
particularly with polarization that we have
yeah,
in the United States
yeah.
now.
Do you have any sense of what's really going on?
I don't.
You don't, or just don't want to say?
No, I don't. I
Yeah,
don't. And
yeah,
it's interesting,
yeah,
Jack. Let me also say that we talked a little bit about the revolution of the intelligence world from, I mean, some fundamentals stayed the same, but
yeah.
what mattered on 10 September to 12 September, correct? Uh, now is with drones and AI and cyber. I mean, imagine me 31 years at CIA, another 6 years there teaching as a contractor. And I also taught our special operation forces and Navy SEALs and Green Berets and Marines. Uh, and I only stopped doing that 2 or 3 years ago, but
Mhm.
I can tell you, we really, 2 or 3 years ago, we really were not into AI, cyber, and drones. Now, I can't, one cannot teach a course without covering AI, cyber, and drones. So it's a similar revolution that I mentioned post 11 September. It's a similar revolution transpiring now. Fascinating.
It's
But
it's such
only
a game
past them.
changer, right? So that seems such a game changer now. So now I imagine the CIA and other agencies have to all of a sudden recalibrate and say, hey, we got to look at cybersecurity and defensing the grid to make sure they doesn't come down and so forth. So all of a sudden now there's different ways, I imagine, that the CIA and other agencies have to start thinking about keeping everybody safe.
Correct, because we are digitized, so we're vulnerable.
Mhm.
I mean, we have a grid that can be bombed. I mean, I don't want to pick on country X in sub-Saharan Africa or
Mhm.
Southwest Asia, but they might not have a grid. So there's not much to bomb there. And well, we had this issue in Afghanistan and Vietnam and some parts of Iraq. There was no grid. There was no digitization. So how do we go? What hurts these guys? It's a real challenge.
Now, do we have, as this country, have to worry about, cybersecurity now and AI and, you know, bad actors trying to, bring down, because I'd imagine if, let's say you bring down the infrastructure, the grid, within probably a week, we all go crazy, right? No internet, no connection.
So I run a small cyber and urban safety company called 1.61 here in Miami. And when it comes to cyber, you know, we talk about self-defense and talk about guns, etc. But we kick off our training by saying you can be the biggest, baddest Navy SEAL with a lot of combat experience in Iraq and Afghanistan, but if your cyber is sloppy, you're going to be vulnerable. So it doesn't matter how much time you put on the pistol range or in the gym bench pressing. If your cyber is sloppy, the investigation is not complete, but I'm like many Americans waiting for the results of the assassination. It was political, so it's not a murder; it's an assassination of the United Healthcare CEO in Manhattan. That what's fascinating to me, and I'm not a law enforcement person, more of an intelligence business, but now I'm doing this via my small company. People have asked me about this. In fact, I've had some CEOs already reach out to me on this issue. The first thing I said was, you know, like many people, I've stayed probably 100 times in that Midtown Hilton. Great location, a great gym, conveniently located, reasonable price, the Midtown Hilton. And that morning, that December morning, there were 10,000 males between 20 and 50 with a backpack on and a hoodie up going to work. But 9,999 were not killers. So even if you had bodyguards and close-in protection, the way it works in this country with Fourth Amendment against unlawful stop and seizure, you're a private bodyguard. You're not going around bracing young men with hoodies up, wearing a backpack in Manhattan, going to work. So that's not the solution. Let's see through the investigation what the deceased's digital footprint looked like, and the assassin, how did he get access to that? That apparently the deceased was staying at a different hotel, was walking at the specific time and that specific route. I mean, that's really hard to do in Manhattan. Like Manhattan's a tough operating environment because there's just so many people, and it's so right. So, I mean, that Hilton must have 6 or 7 exits and entrances. How do you get the right one? Let's see the cyber profile and how this came about. I think it was a cyber digital footprint, digital exhaust issue, and not really physical stalking, in my opinion.
So let's talk. I definitely want to jump in and have you talk about your new company, because I think you're spot on in what you're doing. So, you know, you retired. Now you may be getting unretired in terms of having a startup company of your own. And on the podcast, we've had lots of different startups, but you're doing something from a very different, you know, area. But I think it could be huge, because just as a random person living here, I mean, things look dangerous more than it has in the past, since I was thinking, going back to from when I'm a kid to I'm now. Like, I never used to get concerned about going into Manhattan or other cities. Now there's certain cities or places I probably would not want to go. So it's a little bit, it seems more dangerous, a little bit more violent, a little bit more chaotic. And it sounds like your company is offering the ability to help deal with this stuff. Am I right? Kind of, sort of, that's what you're trying to do, is to deal with this new world that's kind of going out of control. And I don't mean to be hyperbole, but it does feel that way at times. But it seems like what you're trying to do with your company now is to protect people. Is that kind of a fair statement? Is that something, or can you elaborate what, you know, tell the audience what you're doing, what your business, and feel comfortable on here? We're very open. Hey, if you have a business to talk about, feel free.
Thanks, Jack.
Yeah.
So this came about, I mean, first philosophically and technically, why the CIA and say not New Jersey State Police or Delta Force or the FBI? Great men and women in the FBI, Delta Force, and New Jersey State Police. They move in the direction of danger. Okay, it's what they do. Guns and badges and cuffs and
Mhm.
arrest authority. The CIA, we're more Sun Tzu. We're more Art of War. We're
Mhm.
more the Brooks Brothers suit, okay, or the Ann Taylor outfit
Right.
for the ladies, okay, and that so we would avoid the danger. So very important what this company 1.61 does. We don't teach you to win. We teach you to get home to your family. And we don't want you to carry a gun. There's enough guns out there. The whole concealed carry and going to the pistol range, that's fine. We know all about guns. And we actually, it's probably cost me business. We can go to the range if you want to, but you're going to do this concealed carry thing. I'm going to tell you, there's going to be 5 things we're going to teach you. Safety, 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 legal considerations, and then we'll teach you how to shoot. So why don't you take our training that is void of guns and really use smarts? And also, we don't want to disrupt your daily life. There was an article in the New York Post immediately after the United Healthcare CEO assassination that people don't want bodyguards because
Mhm.
I mean, bodyguards is shift work and one gets sick and do you want the bodyguard carrying a gun? And it's complicated. So what we do in Miami, it was geared to high net worth Latin Americans who are very comfortable coming to Miami because Miami is the capital of Latin America. And there's all sorts of security
Mhm.
safety issues south of our border. But because of some of the madness we see in our own country, where we get Americans from New York and Chicago, and they're teenagers coming to Miami where we do our training because we are in the Brickell neighborhood. It's the financial district. It's about
Mhm.
4 blocks by 7, and there's Ubers and there's subways and there's uh, cocktail bars where we can rehearse on drink spiking and assaults in this elevators and restrooms. So it's not just a lecture at the podium or a video. We actually get out on the street, and with your consent, we'll stalk you. And maybe you're being stalked, but maybe you're not. What if you are? What do you do? Again, we don't can't call cops on an innocent person in the United States because somebody you didn't like the way somebody looked at you.
Mhm.
And Jack, what we've done recently, it's the demand has been teenagers. The parents
Really?
reached out and it's teenagers. And I felt particularly well qualified to comment on this because having raised with my wife three boys who are now 26, 23, and 20.
Mm.
So the teenager experience was very similar to us. And we wound up digitizing this in a course, and we cover 5 subjects for teenagers. Would a teenager taking an Uber alone? What are the 4 or 5 things you want your teenager to do before they get into that car? First, they're not going to get into the wrong car driven by a criminal
Mhm.
who's just scoping for a vulnerable kid, right? And then we cover drink spiking, the ubiquitous red Solo cup at campus or sporting events or movie concerts. And now with the scourge of fentanyl out there and corner chemists making concoction that we cover the whole drink spiking, and that it isn't just at a sketchy club on Miami Beach. It could be in the dorm of an elite university. When it comes to assault, we actually instruct that if they ask for your watch, we want you to give it up. We can get you another watch, right? But if it becomes violent, we don't. Winning doesn't mean anything. We want you to get home to your mom and dad. And we've seen some of these protests on campus where it could be a stampede at a sporting event, mob violence that gets out of control, First Amendment protected peaceful protest. Let's say it's Palestinian rights, but becomes a violent pro-Hamas mob and your child is in the middle of that. We instruct on how you escape and evade that and get home. The other one is teenage road rage. Everybody's a bad driver these days, Jack. Everybody's texting, right? And then you throw in alcohol and you throw in drugs. and somebody's having a bad day and somebody got cut off, and there's too many guns out there.
Mm.
So we walk kids through, this is what we want you to do if you think you're being in any way involved in road and stalking. So it's digital stalking, we cover that. And then it moves to physical stalking. Again, you can't call the police because maybe you're a teenage girl, maybe you're cute, maybe a teenage boy looked at you. You can't call a cop to say, hey, I think I'm being stalked, because the police officer is going to say, what makes you think you're being stalked? We teach, however, and I'll give a tip right now on the air. If you think you're being stalked, don't go home. One, you're probably not, but two, if you are, you don't want the bad guy now or gal to know where you live and put the rest of your family in jeopardy. And we've spent a lot of time on cyber, online hate, how to handle that, AI voice spoofing, dating, and there's this sexploitation. Sexploitation is sex is only the vehicle, but it's not sexual, it's blackmail. And that's where a teenager unknowingly exchanging text with that's a young boy or a teenage boy or girl, perhaps romantically, but it's really yeah, I'm going to pick one country right now, and that's Nigeria, because they speak English and they tend to be the scam artists. It's really two Nigerian dudes role playing as a 16-year-old girl, and then they exchange explicit photos, and they blackmail the teenager who then commits suicide. Has happened, I think, in Michigan 2 years ago.
Jeez.
Middle class, upper middle class family. It can happen anywhere. And then finally, as an American, it's embarrassing to say because we have many foreign clients, but it is school shootings, as we saw just the other day in Wisconsin. So we walk the students through that. We want you to get home to your family. You can survive one of these worst case scenarios with a run, hide, fight strategy. So those are the 7 that are out there for teenagers. Our course is Stay Safe Digital Academy. Stay Safe Digital Academy. Check out code Blind Ambition, and you get a special listener price for $89. So that's Stay Safe Digital Academy for teenagers, $89. And it takes about 45, 50 minutes. And frankly, I think it could save a family a lot of grief. Thank you for allowing me to talk about my
Oh, of course.
I read the news every day, and I said, like, you know what, there is no 100% guarantee, but we certainly could have improved the odds of survival for that grieving family right now.
It's really, it's really interesting that you're putting it together, because at first I wouldn't have thought of teenagers as the way to go, but then as you're explaining, it does make sense because they're the most vulnerable. And let's say you're a teenage guy, you know how teenage guys, they think they could take on the world. And just like you're saying, you could give, all right, use Sun Tzu to, like, all right, maybe don't just do something dumb that you're going to regret and actually get yourself in more trouble. Have you thought of like having executive security as part of your business model? Because I thought initially that might be one of the areas you might want to go to, given what just happened recently with the United Health person. Is that
So,
something in the future, maybe?
so Jack, if it's armed bodyguards is not
Mm-hmm.
our thing.
Mm-hmm.
We think principals, CEOs can do so much without going that route. And again, bodyguards aren't just bodyguards; they're humans, and they need a
Mm-hmm.
day off, and they can get sick, and they might not get along with, and can't bring guns to the airports and getting into the lobby of the Hilton. I mean, it is a lifestyle change, and if that's who you are and what you want, fine. Again, there's a lot that the executives executives can do so they don't have to go that route. I also should say some of the madness you see in the subways in New York for adults or teenagers, this area of Miami, we actually take our students to the subway and we get in and out of them. Where you might want to sit, what if the worst happens? So we practice on a real subway, and the New Yorkers and Chicago crowd seem to really appreciate that. We bring in a real Uber and let teenage girls, 14, 15, practicing getting in and out of that car and the correct protocols to ensure that you're where you need to be when it comes to that ride share. I said
Just,
Uber, I should say Lyft.
yeah,
All
yeah. Just so my daughter, she does. Tell me if this is helpful. So whenever she has a Lyft or an Uber, she makes sure she doesn't get in the car first. She goes, "Who's this?" And she wants to make sure the guy tells the name first before her saying her name, just to double check. Then, if it feels okay, or she's feeling a little like, she'll call, let's say myself or my wife, and say, "Oh, we're here doing this," and so forth, just to make sure the driver knows that someone else knows where they are and what's going on. Is that kind of a tip that maybe is helpful, or that's not so great?
No, it's excellent. And
Is that
Jack, the first one is you don't go up to who you think is your Uber driver and say your name must be Manuel.
Mhm.
The criminal is going to say, "Sure, I'm Manuel. Get in.
Yeah.
What's your name?" Okay, sir, what's your name, please? Okay, and then the color, make and model, license plate, photo of the driver, and then your daughter should share my ride with you, Jack,
Mhm.
at the GPS tracking of her route. Share my ride on the Uber app. And if you see the car veer off, now talking to dad is a great thing, but teenagers, you shouldn't be having an argument with your boyfriend or
Mhm.
revealing too much personal information. Oh, my dad's on a business trip, my mom's
Mhm.
alone, or I just broke up with my boyfriend, I need to go have a drink. Be careful. I'm not 99.9% of these people are hardworking and loyal, safety conscious employees of these ride shares, but there's the off chance. And all this was revolutionized, of course, because 3 or 4 years ago, a young lady at University of South Carolina got in a car she thought was an Uber, and she was raped and murdered.
Mhm.
And that revolutionized Uber's safety protocols.
So this is a really interesting lane that you chose. Are there other companies doing the same thing, or you're
So
kind of leading the
nobody
charge?
goes. So we're swimming in blue water. So there's a lot of, again, the gun piece. By the way, we know all about guns. I'm not
Mhm.
saying we're anti,
Yeah.
just that if we would rather do the Real Housewives of Key Biscayne here in Florida, and they should be able to um, enjoy their lives uh, uh, safely. There's just so much that can be done
Mhm.
that you just don't have to do that route. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Your question.
No, I thought it was really interesting that the lane you're in seems that it's
Yes.
fresh and new and different, and it's not, I
So
haven't heard it before. So, because like my first thing, like I was saying, oh, executive security, but there's so many of those companies out there already. Here, what you're doing is something, to me, maybe I'm wrong, but it sounds like this is very new and different and unique. So, and like you said, it's blue water now that you could just run with it.
nobody goes from AI
Hmm.
counter um, uh, voice spoofing that your daughter's voice
Hmm.
spoofed to you, Jack, or your voice spoofed to her. Okay. No one goes from that to how to survive a knife attack in the streets of Manhattan. Please don't tell me it can't happen. 3 people were butchered just about 2 weeks ago by a madman in Manhattan. Okay, and then how to guard against a fentanyl, a roofie drink spiking in the dorm of an elite college. So we're going to go from drink spiking fentanyl to a knife attack to how to take an Uber to online dating, which more than 50% of marriages in the United States now are online. Wonderful relationships and families have grown out of
Hmm.
them, but maybe steps 1, 2, and 3 that you want to take as precaution, just in case that first online in-person contact doesn't work out and the guy or the gal was a nut or worse. So we help you with that.
I think that's great. I think that's a great idea. And it's 161, what, 1 ONE.61, right?
Yes,
And then
the
just
golden ratio,
what is like, all right, what is the
perfect
golden ratio?
the perfect proportion of a rectangle.
Huh.
The Greeks liked it. My business partner likes it. So 1.61. Well, we didn't want to have security and
Right.
guns and Krav Maga or any of that in the title. We wanted to be a little bit
Yeah.
different.
It makes sense because, like, come to think of it, there are so many other like executive, bodyguards and whatever. So, like, if that is already being done, all right, why are you going to be just, the 500th one of that kind of business? You might as well have something for your own and lead your own path. And and what you're doing makes a lot of common sense. It's smart. This is stuff that people are dealing with, parents worry about, teenagers worry about, young adults worry about. So these are things that you could help, out, and much needed as well.
Yeah, it's the, if I may, the um, I guess the center right in the United States likes us because are we recognize the crime problem we have, but the center left or left might appreciate what we do because we're not adding guns to the equation.
Mhm.
There's enough out there. And again, like I said about stalking, whether it's uh, follow home crime in your car or on the street, we don't want you calling the cops because of the way somebody looks or you think they're following you. We want you to take 2 or 3 steps to say, you know what? I remember what that CIA guy said. I'm not going to go home. I'm going to go take steps 1, 2, and 3, and I'm going to confirm or refute that I'm being stalked.
Yeah, this
And
makes a lot of sense.
yeah, what's good.
This is great. As a parent, I'm with you because these are the things you worry about as a parent. I have 2 kids, you have 3 kids, and even if they're 25, 26, they're still your kids. You know what I mean? Yeah, you know how it is. No matter how old you're going to be, you're going to always look for your kids and you want to keep them safe. And we're in a time where a lot of things aren't safe. So I think what your company is doing is going to add a lot of value and a lot of help and make, hopefully save a lot of people from getting into bad situations. And
But
yeah, it's really cool. I'm really glad you did this. I think this is a
yeah,
really great idea.
I think so. We're veteran owned and operated, and
Mhm.
I always try to reach out to veterans who've um, served in tough places, especially Iraq, Afghanistan, and their transition. I keep them close to me, and so it's also very helpful. I should say our in-person course. We also do first aid. We do stop the
Mhm.
bleeding and CPR. And also one small niche, if I may, I almost forgot that here in Miami, for the high net worth crowd, nannies, because mom and dad are really busy, and nannies with the children. And the swimming
Mm.
pool and the kitchen's accents to the kitchen, and nannies don't have, we teach in Spanish.
Mm.
We're Spanish, French, and Portuguese speakers down here. And nannies don't have the language, and nannies don't know how to call 911, and nannies want
Oh, wow.
to FaceTime back to their families in Guayaquil, and they should. Ecuador. They should, but they need to do that safely without, say, exposing uh,
Yeah.
the family. So the nanny piece, how to make a 911 call. Because a nanny in a panic is going to call her sister. So now what do I do? The kid just fell in a pool. No. Nanny will tell you what to do.
Wow. I never would have thought. And I can imagine if you're a nanny, especially let's say in New York in certain neighborhoods, there are a lot of very wealthy people there too. So you got to like worry. Okay, now are they going to break into the house because now they're going to say this is a very wealthy place and we know everything about them through the nanny.
So we're
Wow.
not so much worried about the nanny
Yeah.
as she being the criminal. That's a
Right.
whole other issue, she being the criminal, but it's just that she doesn't know and she's sloppy with her cyber.
Yeah.
You know, here's pictures of the kids and here's the park we go to, and I'm here alone, the family's in Europe. That's there's ways that nannies love their family. We want
Mhm.
nannies to love their families back home, but nannies have to be careful. They have an extra responsibility, and we teach that in Spanish and in French and Portuguese here for the Brazilian, the Haitian, and Spanish-speaking communities. That's my
Yeah. Do you think you're going to try to go to other cities like New York and New Jersey and what have
So,
you over time?
Jack, we did a course for teenagers.
Mhm.
It's open to all, but this was Jewish teenagers in Chelsea about 7 or 8 months ago. And we did it in person, and we think it was successful. We had another group. We did it in Chicago once. We looked at the Hamptons, but it's not realistic
Mhm.
training because there's no no subways and everybody has a driver and a Escalade.
Yeah.
You know, there's no not much.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not much going on out there. And I
Right.
went out there and it's, you know, it's like, hey, can you come
Yeah.
teach it here? I'm saying, look,
Yeah.
it's not.
Yeah.
It's, you know, got to need a little realism
Yeah.
there. Uh, and then just north in not Greenwich, but the city just north of New York City. It'll come to me in a second. About an hour north of New York City. They asked if we could come up there.
Like Greenwich, Connecticut, or Stanford, or one of those places.
North of Stanford, White Plains.
White
White
Plains.
Plains. Yeah, as long as there's the trains and there's
Mhm.
Ubers and there's bar scene, because we use the bar scene for the train on drink spiking. You know, we use Splendid as a simulator for Rufinol
Mhm.
or ketamine or fentanyl. That how to protect your drink, to do, how to handle it. What if you don't feel well? Where are you going to go? What are you going to do? So it's we prefer Miami, but we can bring it on the road.
Well, this is great, Dale. I really appreciate you taking your time. This is, I think, for the audience we have, is so different because they're used to hearing about tech stuff and the newest app and maybe something on Wall Street. So this brings something that probably people never really thought about, and so I think it'd be very illuminating to people who who be watching it. So I really appreciate you taking the time, and good luck with the company. This is awesome. You know, I I'd be glad to send people your way. Because uh, my kids, they're all that age that you're the demographic that's you're looking after. So I appreciate the new startup that you're doing, and I think it's going to help a lot of people. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Dale.
Jack Kelly, thank you very
All right.
much.
My pleasure.
Feliz Navidad from Miami.
Thanks.